I see them! Right here! That's on! Got you!
God
Oh God, no!
Okay.
Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. I learned something absolutely crazy the other day. Apparently, paternity fraud, i.e. when you have an affair and then get pregnant, have a kid, and then don't tell the husband that the kid isn't theirs, paternity fraud, apparently that's completely legal, which is like crazy. So that's legal, but like regular fraud, like just, you know, fucking people out of money, like with through faulty investments or Ponzi schemes or, you know, buying goods, not delivering goods, that sort of thing, you know, just generally fucking people out of money, is in between like 2 and 10 years in prison. Okay, like, that doesn't make sense. Like, paternity fraud is also fucking people out of money from anywhere from tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how long the paternity fraud goes on for. But, like, it's worse than that in like 3 other ways as well. Like, the first way is, like, it's usually dark tetrad and sociopath behavior to carry out an affair in the first place. It's usually sociopathic in nature. You having a kid by that sociopath is propagating sociopath genes in the world. I'd say you have a duty as a person not to propagate sociopath genes in the world, i.e. trash people. But like, not only that, you're also screwing your partner's genes out of the gene pool, which is essentially like killing them, like legacy and genetically speaking. Like, it's very cruel, it's very evil and like gross to do. And then of course you've got another 2 problems after that. You've got the fact that after that, divorce proceedings will usually, you know, proceed after that. with the divorce court being heavily biased in favour towards the woman. What was it, like 95% biased towards women, something like that. That in turn will usually financially crush the man. And then, of course, there's the emotional impact from the whole lot of it. The betrayal of the woman, the propagation of the genes, the fact that the kid's not his and been made to believe so. Like, it's just fucking evil. And apparently it's completely legal. Like, whereas regular fraud is illegal, just like basic screwing out of money. But paternity fraud, which is like, what, at least 3 or 4 times worse than regular fraud, is completely legal. In my opinion, it should be anywhere from a 5 to 10 year prison sentence. And that would put some boundaries on all these, you know, feminist crazies that are just, you know, going insane and having like multiple abortions and like shouting it and all that sort of shit. Like, it would be a really good hard boundary to also curb like Marxism's weaponization of female narcissism, particularly in the arts and that sort of thing, and also relationships. And it'd be like the first step in solving, you know, single parenthood problems in the black community, because like, if you have that as a foundation, like, okay, you do that, you're getting 5 to 10 years in prison. I think it's quite a, you know, really big deterrent, and it would really curb female narcissistic behaviour. I don't believe there should be any sort of stigma around asking for a paternity test either, because most women seem to immediately pull, oh, don't you trust me card sort of thing. Like, that to me is nuts. There should be zero stigma about that. Like, you're entering into like a partnership to raise offspring. Yeah, I don't think you get to pull a trust card on that sort of shit. Like, what triggered me on this line of thought was there was a study that claimed the, you know, parent illegitimacy and paternity fraud were as high as 30%. Like, I don't think it is that high, and like, there's been other studies since that claim it's between 1 and 3% of people with children. Like, 1 to 3%, like, roughly corresponds with narcissistic sociopathic proportion, because like, it's like 2 to 5% of people in society are either narcissistic, sociopathic, or psychopathic. It's like roughly 5% total. But like, yeah, absolutely crazy. Like, it sort of corresponds with that. I'd say the majority of people doing it would be either psychopathic or narcissistic or sociopathic. That, like, poaching of partners behavior tends to be narcissistic at the very least, usually sociopathic. So like, that would track. But like, I guess there's also a ton of people that just lie about that shit. Like, I reckon all the stigma needs to be taken away from paternity testing. And I reckon there needs to be harsh laws on paternity fraud, big time. Because that is, what, 3 times worse than regular fraud, easily. Like, the emotional damage that it can inflict on men, the financial damage it can inflict on men, the damage to legacy, like, it's It's soul-crushingly bad. And the fact that there is no law against it, in fact that the courts will still usually side with the women, like over the men in cases of this, is absolutely insane. It should be, oh yeah, like 5 to 10 years, like straight up. If it's happened over the course of like, what, 20 to 30 years with like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the man can no longer find a partner to like, you know, produce offspring to continue his like genetic heritage and genetic line, yeah, that should be like 10 years in prison for the woman. Like, that should be locked up. Big time. That's bad. But also, like, propagating narcissist and sociopath genes, assuming narcissism and sociopathy stems from a gene, which I think there are, like, vague studies that suggest that that's the case, that at least people have a genetic predisposition towards it from genes. Like, propagating that in society at the cost of your own partner, that seems to be just like a fundamental failure of duty in women. It's like what we were talking about the other day, with like female narcissism ruining shit in society because they have no sense of duty. Like, that is just like a major dereliction of duty in regard to like society, humanity. Like, you're propagating like the worst kind of people out of like, what, selfish lust? Yeah, like, there should be like prison time associated with that shit, right? And it's not like it's a victimless crime either. Like, the crime itself is like soul crushing. Like, cases of fraud where people lose like 50 grand are like significantly easier to forget and recover from than like, what, a 5 to 10 year relationship with paternity fraud in it. And like this, like also this contributing to like the dating, you know, marketplace and all that sort of thing, is probably a very significant contributor to the men's suicide rate. I have no doubt that it is, right? It's like divorced men, massive suicide rate. And even just regular men these days have like a massive suicide rate. I have no idea. That's probably because they're unable to find a partner and that sort of thing. And like the feminists, you know, not only pushing this, but pushing like harsher laws against domestic violence and everything like that. Like, I could pretty much understand where a dude's coming from if he, like, in a fit of rage, you know, beats his woman to death because she's like, for 20 years she's had an affair and the kids that he thought were his are not his. Can you imagine what that does to his world? Like, that's kind of understandable. Like, that's his whole genetic heritage. He's been wasting his entire life in a relationship that was a lie. Not only that, he's been slaving away at work, supporting this family like that was never really his. Like, that's pretty fucked. Like, that's that's getting up there in terms of what, provocation. That's not no provocation. And like, what, now Victoria has a new behavior of men minister, which is like the fucking stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And it's not just like raising like another man's kids. Like, that's fair enough. That can be noble, particularly if like they're entering a relationship and there's kids on both sides or whatever, and you decide to, you know, raise those kids as your own. But that's not this. Like, this is usually from like a sociopathic sort of affair sort of deal, where the woman has decided to betray her partner, and there's some sort of weird status thing with the man here as well, which is at the very least, probably got something to do with power and narcissism, and at worst is like outright sociopathy sort of thing. Like, so technically, like, they're raising like someone with like a genetic disposition towards sociopathy as well, on top of like the fact that they're not their own kids. Like, you can't ignore that as a provocation. That is pretty insane. And like, then you see like, yeah, like men beating women to death, and like in pretty high numbers too, and you like see like feminism's role in all this by like empowering women with all these ideas of like feminist promiscuity and all this type of shit. And like, you wonder where it's coming from. Like, part of the problem here is, you know, that the playing field's really not equal at all, right? And I think, like, equaling the playing field, in my opinion, I reckon it would drop domestic abuse. You would see more prison time for women, of course, if, like, paternity fraud was, like, a 5 to 10 year, like, prison sentence, as it fucking should be. Like, I can't see an excuse for why it's not. The fact that it's not against the law is fucking insane to me. Like, I do not understand where they're coming from there at all. But perhaps some, like, vague notion of allowing the mother to look after the kids still? But, like, fucking yikes. That's like a miscarriage of justice to allow that sort of shit to happen, in my opinion. And look, I think it would also, like, reduce the... Like, it'd strengthen the tradition of marriage, in my opinion, too, because, it, like, the risk of paternity fraud would add another barrier to the desirability of having an affair, right? Because if you get them pregnant, you can literally go to prison, especially if they're not honest about it. And it'd just keep people, you know, a lot more honest. Like, the alternative is that, you know, it doesn't, but that's why I think we need to remove the stigma on paternity testing and relationships with children anyway. Especially with, like, marriages with children. Like, especially with women that are, like, habitually promiscuous from, you know, years and years and years and years of clubbing and Tinder and, you know, all the modern bullshit Marxist shit that was brought in, you know, during the 60s and 70s and shit, when, you know, we were in proxy wars with, you know, Marxist China, and all the freaking infiltration and shit happened. And, yeah, the culture was pretty much deformed from there. But, like, I think it's a start. Yeah. 5 to 10 years for paternity fraud. Seems fair. Start from there. Bit of deterrent. Bit of deterrent for shitty behaviour that, you know, destroys families and kids and marriages. Chuck a bit of deterrent in there, see what happens. Because, like, this stupid leftist notion of just making it easier to do shit. Like, for example, in San Francisco, giving the drug addicts crack pipes and shit, allowing them to do drugs easier, making it even more of a path of least resistance. Like, that's not gonna help them to stop doing that, right? It's pretty stupid. It's pretty evil when you think about it. Whereas if you make it harder to do, with, like, greater consequences if you fuck it up, I think it acts as more of a deterrent. Look at old, Vlad the Impaler, like, leaving his watch in the middle of the town hall. Like, and it wasn't stolen, even though, because he had to raise taxes to fight the Ottomans, all the people were really poor. But they knew if they would have stolen the watch, he would have fucking executed or impaled them. Like, people aren't like, view people as, you know, that's one of the schools of thought, that they will rebel against theoretical oppression. Yet, not always. And if you make shit easy to do, you can pretty much guarantee that people are gonna do it. So, like, that's the, you know, the theory behind making, you know, terrible actions the path of least resistance. Like, the same applies in theory to abortion, right? You are, by allowing abortion, you're lowering the cost of promiscuity. And you're making it much more acceptable, much more easy to do. The stakes are lower, and it's like an easier path. It's a path of least resistance. It corrupts people into doing it, and subsequently you get more and more abortion. Like, if you have a look at, like, the black community, where they've corrupted the entire culture around the black community, the bloody Democrats, with all this path of least resistance policy, like light on crime, enabling like drug addicts with like, yeah, just like horrible shit, right? All that. And you get what, 2 million abortions in like a year or whatever it was, whatever that stat was. It's just insane, and it's just like horrible human cost to the whole fucking thing. And like the knock-on effects of the whole goddamn lot of it too are just absolutely atrocious. Like, for everyone, for the taxpayer, for everyone. Society breaks down, you end up like creating policies where you're allowing people to steal certain amounts before the police even respond, which is, okay, you want to talk about a path of least resistance, that's guaranteeing people will steal shit at that point. You're like rewarding and encouraging the worst behavior in a community to do that. From there, you're just going to get, you know, skyrocketing crime. You're going to need more police to deal with the crime, so you're looking at skyrocketing taxes. You're probably looking at, well, you are already looking at corruption, because the politicians have already clearly failed in their duty if they're pushing this sort of shit policy to begin with. Like, yeah. Like, that's how, you know, shit falls apart. And it's just like common sense policy. You make something harder to do, people will stop doing it as much. But like, then you get like all these super tolerant, insane progressives, and they view it as like oppression, you know, by the state, that sort of shit. They view not allowing drug addicts to be able to do drugs, not allowing like the complete destruction of the family unit through promiscuity, as oppression. And like, at what point do you say, okay, it's deliberate. It's deliberate subversion by Marxist progressives to subvert the West, to destroy the family unit in the West. And like, it's just getting more and more obvious. Like, it's probably going to lead to like a major resurgence of Christianity too. Because like, people are just going to rebel against, you know, the stupid obvious corruption. Like, it already sort of has. There's already been a bit of a resurgence of Christianity, particularly in popular culture and meme culture and stuff like that. Like, especially lately. So, hey look, it's not all bad. You're triggering a good Christian value response in the people by, you know, doing what you're doing. Like, I doubt that's deliberate on the part of any politician, because they're like super shallow and self-serving, and in a lot of instances just fucking stupid. They just don't know what they're pushing for in terms of policy. Like, if they did, like, okay, they're pushing for the abolishment of, like, property rights, and they're like, what? They're making like several $100,000 a year, they have multiple homes and that sort of thing. You really want to push for the abolishment of property rights, do you? Like, they've got no fucking clue. And they've got no clue how easy, like, it's not easy to destroy the West, because the West has already, well, it won the Cold War, it won World War II. Like, it accumulated a ton of wealth during that time. And it, along with all that wealth, though, it accumulated this tolerance towards stupid Marxist shit that was, like, you know, baked into it from the start, because, like, we allied with the Soviet Union, and then we helped China after Japan fucked China up in World War II and all that sort of thing. Like, the Marxist version was always going to be baked into it, and, like, people call, like, oh, it's the Red Scare, or, well, they were persecuting communists. Have a look where we are now. Before you say anything more, look where we are now.
No! Move out!
But yeah, look, all this shit's on a timer. Like, I was watching, like, a Peter Zeihan politics video the other day, and it proposed the question, what happens in China after President Xi dies? And because Xi has purged everyone around him, he has no competent successor. So the most likely outcome is China splits off into separate states and basically falls apart as a global superpower. Like, that was already going to happen because, you know, the demographic collapse. Like, it's going to happen even worse in Russia with Russia's demographic collapse. Like, that's going to happen even quicker. They've lost, like, so many fighting age men during, well, pretty much all their wars. All their wars, they've had pretty shit tactics in Russia and tended to lose tons and tons of men. As a result, it's fucked up their age demographics. So, pretty soon, they're just going to age out as a population. They're going to have major population decline. When they do, it's probably going to lead to a pretty big economic decline in Russia. Same sort of thing with China, because the one-child policy. And obviously, all the people they lost, you know, during the Cultural Revolution and the Great Famine and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So, look, they'll probably not be as scary as threats in the future, but they're not what we have to worry about. What we have to worry about is the creeping totalitarianism in our governments and the shit that our governments are pushing, because they got very totalitarian with COVID.
close one.